Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going over my tight end start or sit decisions for every single game of week number 1, going from Thursday Night Football, the Chiefs and the Lions, all the way up until Monday Night Football with the Bills and the Jets, and I'll tell you guys whether I think you should start or sit the tight ends in all of those games. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, then please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below while you're down there. Whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. And if you want my weekly rankings as well as a guaranteed answer to any questions you have, make sure you join the Patreon for $7.50. Link in the video description and the pinned comment. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 1 tight end start or sit decisions. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the Detroit Lions at the Kansas City Chiefs. We did get a further update on Travis Kelce's injury. Kelce has been diagnosed with a bone bruise, which isn't that bad, but it would be truly shocking if he ended up playing tomorrow. I see no reason for a Super Bowl contender, the Super Bowl champ from last year, to risk injuring their second best or third best player, depending on how you want to order Mahomes, Jones, as well as Kelce. Right? No reason to roll Kelce out tomorrow on Thursday Night Football, so Noah Gray will be starting in his place. Could Noah Gray fall ass backwards into somehow scoring a touchdown? 100%, but ultimately, I'm going to sit him down in this game. If I had Travis Kelce, I would definitely look for other options on the waiver wire other than Kelce's backup. Sam Laporta, first ever NFL action here without Jameson Williams. I do really see a path for Sam Laporta to have a pretty solid showing here. Ultimately, do I have 100% trust in a rookie in his first ever game? Probably not, but at the end of the day, if push came to shove, right, if Laporta's on the waiver wire and you lost Travis Kelce, I think he's a decent start here. Again, I was a big fan of him coming out of college. I love the landing spot with the Detroit Lions. It really is just a wait and see type of thing. How is he going to play in his first ever game? I hope for my best ball teams where I drafted Sam Laporta a million different times that he has quite a solid showing again. I think he's a really solid tight end, and I think the situation without Jameson Williams does give him a nice bump up. Next up, we move to the Sunday slate with the Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons. Kyle Pitts is a must-start tight end. Now, I get that the Kyle Pitts Express has been an up and down roller coaster ride for his first 2 years of his NFL career, but ultimately, while you didn't have to draft Kyle Pitts in the first 5 rounds of a majority of fantasy football drafts, at tight end, you have to start your studs. I don't care what you think about Kyle Pitts. If you drafted him, you are 100% going to play him up against the Carolina Panthers. We'll see how Desmond Ridder fares in his first game of this season. Obviously, last year, Ridder wasn't all that great, but Mariota wasn't either. I think this could be a big bounce back year for Kyle Pitts. I was a huge fan of him in fantasy football drafts, especially since he was falling so much further than he did in the last 2 years of fantasy football draft. So up against the Panthers, I am firing Kyle Pitts out there for Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst is the most boring tight end ever for fantasy football. Could Hayden Hurst get 9 fantasy points in this matchup against the Falcons? Definitely, but he is as boring as it gets, right? We got a rookie quarterback in Bryce Young in his first ever start. They have some decent wide receivers, and they also have Miles Sanders on the team. Hayden Hurst is as boring as it gets, and he is definitely going to be a sit for me. The only time I am ever playing a guy like Hayden Hurst is if there was an injury to one of the tight ends on my team, or if my tight end was on bye, and there's not a lot in the waiver wire, and then I'm just forced into playing Hayden Hurst. Next up, we move to the Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. I was a big David Njoku guy all offseason, and that will continue in this matchup up against the Cincinnati Bengals. I know there was a lot of people on Twitter in the comment section be like, Nick, don't you know that Deshaun Watson doesn't really throw the ball to the tight end? If you look at his metrics in Houston, you'll see that he doesn't really throw the ball to the tight end. Well, guess what, asshole? And I'm not talking to everyone. I'm talking to the commenter that I just spoke as. In Houston, he never had a tight end that could even fucking sniff the jockstrap of David Njoku. David Njoku is an excellent NFL tight end. Has his career been amazing? Has he solidified himself as a top 5 tight end in the NFL? No, but I think with Deshaun Watson, with the red zone upside that he presents, I am very excited to see what Njoku does with Watson in his first ever game. Irv Smith, another one of those guys that is just as boring as it gets, except for with Irv Smith, he is competing with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, all of these guys for targets. Irv Smith is a touchdown or bust tight end in any given week. Next up, we move to the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Jelani Woods was placed on the IR prior to the season. I looked at the depth chart, and to me, Mo Alley Cox should be the starting tight end in this game. Over the past couple of years, right, we have seen that these rookie quarterbacks do like to target the tight end, and we all know that Mo Alley Cox is good for like one humongous game every single year. Now, you're never gonna know when it's gonna happen. It is going to catch up to you in the back alley, right? And Mo Alley Cox is gonna score like 25 points in one game, and then you are never going to see it again. He's gonna score those points, you're gonna be like, holy shit, Mo Alley Cox is back. This is finally going to be the year where he gets a nice stretch of games. You add him, you take your tight end in your lineup, you throw him to the bench, you throw Mo Alley Cox in, and the guy gets like 3 fantasy points and you're shocked. It has happened so many times where Cox has one huge game and then just fades into irrelevancy. Don't fall for it yet again. Evan Ingram honestly surprised me in a huge way last season. Evan Ingram was a guy for years that was just taunted by NFL fantasy football fans for just not being able to catch the ball, right? The ball would be right in his fucking hands, in the webbing, and it would just somehow fall out of his hands. But last year, he had some Gorilla Glue on his hands, and he was catching the rock very well. I think the addition of Calvin Ridley does hurt Evan Ingram, but ultimately he does have significant red zone upside in what should be a great offense in Jacksonville, so I like Easy E in this spot against a not so bueno Indianapolis Colts defense. Next up, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the cold like Minnesota Vikings. Now, TJ Hawkinson was dealing with a ear infection or something for like 3 months of the offseason, and then magically, once he got that brand new contract, his ear infection went away. Very funny how that works, right? TJ Hawkinson was a top 3, top 4 tight end, most likely in your fantasy football drafts. I think most drafts went Kelsey, Andrews, then Hawkinson. There were some people, myself included, that were higher on Waller than Hawkinson, but in terms of most drafts, I think Hawkinson was the number 3 tight end. Going up against the Buccaneers defense that is going to end up being relatively soft this season, I think Hawkinson could have a very big showing here. Hawkinson is what I described as him being all off season, right? He is that safety net, that condom that you throw around your roster, the Durex, the Trojan, right? Game in and game out, he's probably going to get you on average 10, 12, 13 fantasy football points. Does he have the upside to have one huge game? Yes, but is he going to stack up 20-plus point performances multiple times on the season like a Kelsey or Andrews can? To me, probably not. But Hawkinson is that safety net that you got in your lineup week in and week out, and I definitely think he could have a solid performance here up against the Bucs, especially if the team doesn't use Jordan Addison as much as I think they will in the first couple of weeks. That opens a lot of upside for Mr. Hawkinson. Cade Otton is pretty interesting as well, considering he is really the only tight end of name on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we have seen Cade Otton flash in the past. The problem is Baker Mayfield's his quarterback, and he also has Chris Godwin as well as Mike Evans to compete with in terms of targets. I think Cade Otton was a sneaky pick in best ball drafts, but ultimately in redraft, even up against a Vikings defense that isn't going to be all that great, I think in week number 1, I don't think Brian Flores is going to magically transform this defense in week number 1. Cade Otton would be riding the pine. He's probably available on the waiver wire in most leagues. Next up, we got the Les Titans at the New Orleans Saints. Now, Chig Okonkwo is a start for me on the week. This is a guy that I was as high as it could possibly get on Chig before DeAndre Hopkins signed there, right? Because they had Burks, Chig, and they also had Derrick Henry. So I figured in the red zone, the ball is either going to go to Derrick Henry, Tractor Cedo, who's going to run some poor bastard over and send him into Middle Earth, or they were just going to throw the ball to Chig. Chig was really solid last season. I do think that the upside of Chig has been deflated like a football in Indianapolis when you're a Patriot player because of DeAndre Hopkins, but the touchdown argument is still there. I think he is going to be having some solid games, but he is 100% a boom or bust tight end. I just don't know that he could have a large target share in an offense with Burks as well as Hopkins when they are also an incredibly run-heavy team because they have Derrick Henry there. Juwan Johnson is going to be a start for me. It's going to be interesting to see how they utilize all of these tight ends, right? How much is Taysom Hill going to play a factor in this offense? Where we see Taysom Hill score like 2 touchdowns somehow in this game in the red zone instead of them throwing the ball. They just directly snap it to Taysom Hill. He does a 360 no scope, jumps over the offensive line and just puts just the tip over and then ends up scoring a touchdown. I like Juwan Johnson's skill. He would be closer to a bottom of the barrel start though. If I had to pick one or the other, I would definitely lean with Chig, but I am interested to see how the Saints offense looks up against a no bueno Tennessee Titans defense, especially with the new look offense under Derek Carr. Next up, we got the San Francisco 49ers at the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you have ended up enjoying thus far, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. Now, George Kittle is hurt. Shocker, right? This motherfucker gets hurt brushing his teeth in the morning. George Kittle is dealing with a groin injury and could miss this game. I haven't seen a lot of reporting about George Kittle, which is shocking. The most recent 49ers report is that they gave Nick Bosa a fat contract. They gave him one of those checks you get for winning the lottery. They had to back up the Brinks truck for the man. So Kittle, nothing really being reported right now that I have been able to find, and I just scavenged the internet for information. Seems like it's a toss-up, right? Could be good to go. Might not play. If he doesn't play, then we got Charlie Warner or Ross Dwelly being the guy. Those guys are obvious sits. If Kittle is able to go, then I'm playing Kittle. I hope Kittle could just have one healthy season because I genuinely think that Kittle is one of the most talented tight ends in the NFL. This dude's blocking is insane. He's throwing up more pancakes than IHOP on a Sunday, but George Kittle, just, like I said, just tends to get hurt doing anything. Like, he stubs his toe and he misses 4 fucking games, which does suck. Pat Freiermuth is going to be a start for me. I have been a Pat Freiermuth guy all offseason. Obviously, this is a tough matchup, and something that does scare me is that this will be lower scoring. The problem is, are you really going to try to galaxy brain yourself into sitting Pat Freiermuth, who is a very talented tight end? And the thing is, Kenny Pickett has looked a lot better in preseason compared to last year. With that said, though, it would have been hard to look as bad as Kenny Pickett looked last season. Next up, we got the Arizona Cardinals at the left. Hands up. Who are we? The Commanders? We are sitting all the tight ends in this game. Logan Thomas, could he play? Could he not? If he plays, I don't see him playing a lot of snaps. John Bates has been looking real good in preseason. Even with that said, though, Terry McLaurin is seeming like he might play in this game. Now, I've said this a bunch and talked about it a bunch on the videos this week. If McLaurin plays, I don't think it's going to be like, oh, McLaurin is out there on a majority of the snaps, right? I don't think Ron Rivera is that much of a bozo to send Terry McLaurin out there playing a gazillion snaps against the fucking Cardinals, right? If this was against the Cowboys or the Eagles or something, maybe I would get it. But it's also week 1 against the Cardinals, a team that you should steamroll. Now, Gannon is playing absolute mind tricks on everyone, the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. This man says it looks like it's going to be Clayton Looney Tunes. Clayton Tunes is the starter. And then the depth chart comes out and it says the starter for week 1 is Josh Dobbs or Clayton Tune. Then it comes out today that he's saying, I think it's going to end up being Joshua Dobbs. Figure it out, man. The game's a couple of days away from now. Doesn't really fucking matter at all because I'm not playing Trey McBride. This Cardinals offense reeks to high heaven. The only guy that I have even a remote amount of confidence in is my man, James Conner. So Trey McBride, Logan Thomas, and John Bate are going to be sits for me. Next up, we got the Houston Texans at the Baltimore Ravens. And I did talk a lot about in the quarterback and the wide receiver video for these teams that I was really nervous about the receivers for the Baltimore Ravens, right? Who's going to be the #1 target? Is it going to be Zay Jones, Rashad Master-Bateman, or is it going to be Odell Beckham Jr.? Who's going to be getting the looks in the red zone? I would think it would be Odell and Mark Andrews, but we know one thing, and that is death taxes Mark fucking Andrews, because Lamar Jackson loves throwing the rock to Mark Andrews. Andrews could have 2 touchdowns in this game up against the Texans. Mark Andrews should finish as the tight end 1 without Kelce being active in this game. Again, it would take a miracle for Kelce to go in week 1. And even if they say, oh, Kelce, you could play, why would they risk it? Talked about it at the beginning of the video. Why in the world would you risk Travis Kelce's health in week 1 against the Lions? Now, could the Lions beat the Chiefs? I think so. But do you want to risk the best tight end in the NFL re-injuring himself in week 1? If it's the playoffs, the AFC Championship, the Super Bowl, sure. But it's week 1. So I think Andrews is going to sit upon the Iron Throne as the tight end 1 at the end of the week. Dalton Schultz. Been seeing a lot about Dalton Schultz in the preseason, like how much work is Dalton Schultz going to get? Definitely a question mark, but he is one of the more talented tight ends in the NFL, in my opinion. Had a decent run in Dallas. Now he gets shipped off 5 feet away to the Houston Texans. I think Schultz could be a safety blanket for CJ Stroud in this game up against the Ravens. Thus why I would be willing to start him. Next up, we got the Green Bay Packers at the Chicago Bears. In this one, I like Luke Musgrave as well as Cole Kmet. Now, a report came out earlier today that Christian Watson as well as Romeo Doubs didn't practice. That's a little scary. I'm a Christian Watson truther, and if he doesn't play in week 1, that would be no bueno for me. If that is the case, though, Luke Musgrave definitely moves up in the rankings because they don't have a lot of targets to throw the rock to in Green Bay, right? Rookie Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, you would think would be the top 2 targets in that scenario. The Bears defense definitely has gotten better, but they're also not the 85 Bears or even the Bears defense that carried Kissing Titties Mitchell Trubisky to a double doink loss in the playoffs a couple of years ago. So Musgrave to me would be a start, but again, closer to the bottom of the barrel. Definitely feel more confident in Cole Kmet, but they also do have former Green Bay tight end, so a revenge game for Big Bob Tunyon here. Interested to see how they like to mix in the 2 tight ends. We do know last year that Justin Fields loved Cole Kmet for a strong stretch of games, but with the addition of Wiki DJ Moore, we kind of have to see how things play out. But again, at tight end, there are so many tight ends that might just score like 3 fantasy points. Like Logan Thomas, if he plays, might score 0. Same thing goes with John Bates. Like, at least you know Cole Kmet's going to get a couple of targets, which should result in a couple of fantasy points. Gun to the head, though, I would definitely rather have Cole Kmet over Luke Musgrave in my lineup. Next up, we got the Las Vegas Raiders at the Denver Broncos. But before we break this game down, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends, our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, I know you guys have already done all of your fantasy football drafts, but you can get in some more action on Underdog Fantasy. They recently released the Puppy 4 tournament that is close to filling. It is a best ball draft. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best thing about fantasy football because it's the draft and that's it. There's no waiver, no trades, no in-season management. At the end of every single week, Underdog automatically throws the highest scores into your lineup for you. Puppy 4 is $5 to enter, $25K to first place, and $250,000 in total prizes. Now, if you don't want to play in a big tournament like the Puppy 4, they also have sit and go games, which is essentially you versus 11 other people, like a 12-team league with as low of a buy-in as $3. Top 2 places make money, third place gets their money back. If this sounds interesting to you, use promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description for a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. So you deposit $100, they give you an $100. 50, additional 50, 25, additional 25. The minimum deposit on Underdog to get that bonus is $10. You deposit 10, you get an additional 10. So back into the Raiders versus the Denver Broncos. Greg Dulcich is a start, but again, he is only really a start because there are so many garbage fucking tight ends in fantasy football in the NFL that aren't going to see enough targets to where I am willing to chance Dulcich. Now, he is in the danger zone because Troutman is being listed in the depth chart ahead of him. Now, I always say, don't worry too much about the depth chart, but we saw in preseason, it seems like Sean Payton likes Troutman. I think, even if Troutman's the guy, it'll take like 2 games for Sean Payton to get through his fucking dumb skull that, hey, maybe Greg Dulcich is like 90 times better than Troutman. So, Dulcich is a bottom-of-the-barrel start this week because of that. I think Dulcich does have a lot of upside for the season long. So, if he has a down game, I definitely would not cut him, but he's far from an ideal start, even in a cupcake soft-serve matchup up against that Raiders defense. Michael Mayer is going to be a sit. There definitely was a lot of hype for him this offseason, but up against the Broncos defense, I don't want to chance him, especially as a rookie tight end. Next up, we move to the Philadelphia Eagles at the New England Patriots, and we talked about how Hawkinson is a safe safety blanket, the condom play, triple wrapping some rubbers over your team. Dallas Goedert is the exact same thing, but just with a little bit less upside. Dallas Goedert is in a loaded to the gills offense. Jalen Hurts, great offensive line. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. They also have a running back by committee myriad of DeAndre Swift, Kenny Gainwell, Kenny G-Spot, as well as Rashad with 2 A's Penny. So I like the Eagles offense a ton. So does everyone. Not a hot take. Goddard is a very safe play game in and game out. I talk about this a lot with how many cooks they have in the kitchen. I don't think he really has the upside to have multiple games of over like 20 fantasy points. But he's must play every week because he's going to get you 10 points. He's going to be a decent tight end game in and game out. The Patriots have Hunter Henry as well as Mike Licky Amagasicki, the gritty master himself, up against the Eagles defense. This would be a recipe for disaster for any of these tight ends. Next up, we got my Dolphins at the L.A. Chargers. Tua Tagovailoa versus Justin Herbert, the pervert. Durham Smythe is our tight end one. I wish we were able to hold on to the boy, Mike Gesicki. The problem was the Dolphins didn't really like Gesicki because he couldn't block, right? George Kittle's out there throwing pancakes, like I said. More pancakes than a fucking Denny's, right? But Gesicki just could not do that, right? He's basically essentially like a third receiver on your team. Smythe can get down and dirty in the trenches. He could throw a block. He could send some poor bastard into Valhalla, right? So Durham Smythe, great blocking tight end. If he scores a touchdown, you're going to be happy. If he doesn't, he's probably getting 2 fantasy points, and that might be high. He might score 0 fantasy points, even up against the Chargers. Gerald Everett is a start. This Chargers team is loaded to the gills. The addition of Quentin Johnston, in my opinion, does hurt Gerald Everett's safety on a week in, week out standpoint, but it doesn't, in my opinion, hurt his upside. I think the upside of Everett is still very high with Justin Herbert at quarterback with a team that could be in a very incredibly high-scoring matchup, Dolphins versus Chargers. Does on paper reek of points, even though I've told you guys to temper your expectations. Maybe this will be a lower scoring game than people think, but I am a fan of Gerald Everett here. Is he a must-start guy? No, but if you got him, I would probably play him over a lot of guys. Next up, we move to the LA Rams at the Seattle Seahawks. I'm a huge Tyler Higbee guy this week. I got him ranked, I believe, as tight end 7 or tight end 8 if you want the rankings. They're on the Patreon for $7.50. I'll post my rankings every single week on there, and you can also ask questions on there, and you get a guaranteed answer. There are a lot of comments on the YouTube videos. Do I try to get to all of them? Of course. But am I going to be able to get to all of them? Probably not. So you're definitely going to get an answer if you're on the Patreon, though. So we got Higbee. I was banging the drum for Higbee all offseason as this super safe tight end with a lot of upside as the number 2 target in LA, late in drafts. Well, guess what? Now he might be the number 1 fucking target because Cooper Kupp could be missing a significant amount of time. There is no way that he plays in week number 1. Seahawks defense, pretty mid. I think Higbee has some touchdown upside. Problem is, I think Higbee's true upside is unleashed when Kupp is there because they can actually move the ball then closer to the red zone. But I do want to play Higbee this week. Noah Fant. What a career Noah Fant has had, right? So much hype, so little to be done with it, but he did have that high draft capital on paper. He's a good tight end, so he keeps getting roles in the NFL. Rams defense isn't that great, but I don't want to rely on Noah Fant. Next up, we got the Dallas Cowboys at the New York Giants because you waited all day for Sunday night. I should be the fucking person that sings that song. Darren Waller of the Giants must start. Throw him into your lineup. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. I love Darren Waller. So much hype in the offseason about how this guy is just tossing guys off of him in the red zone. They can not stop him. Bro is looking like Hulk, and no one can get him in the red zone. In that preseason game, it was like Daniel Jones and him were on the same wavelength. Just constantly getting fed the rock. Darren Waller is a matchup nightmare for any defense. As long as he can stay healthy, he could be the tight end 1 at the end of the year, like him against the Cowboys. Jake Ferguson, one of those guys where it's like, do I want to start Ferguson or Dulcich? And you're worried about Dulcich, then you could start Ferguson. I get it. A lot of hype for Ferguson. A lot of weapons, though, in Dallas. How's Dak going to look in week 1? Dak coming off of laying an egg in the playoffs against the Niners when Zeke was his center, if you remember the end of that game. The Cowboys got absolutely dookied on last year in their first game up against the Bucs. I don't even think they scored a touchdown in that matchup week 1. That was a night game as well. I like Jake Ferguson's upside for the season, but for week 1, we are not going to be starting him. Final game here, Monday Night Football, the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jumbo Jets. Now, Dalton Kincaid has been a hot topic like the store all offseason, but we'll see week 1. How does this go, right? The Jets defense is tough. Now, the Jets defense actually isn't the best against the tight end. Problem is, they have 2 tight ends. They have Dawson Knox one time, if you're with me, as well as Dalton Kincaid. A lot of people giving the gawk 9,000 to Dawson Knox, or not to Dawson Knox, to Dalton Schultz. Dalton Kincaid is what we meant there. Just fucking said every name except for the right name, right? Oh my God, first round draft pick. Oh my God. And they're like people jizzing their pants over Kincaid. We'll see. Is this going to be like, are we going to see 80% Kincaid, 20% Knox? Are we only going to see Kincaid in 2 tight end sets? Are we going to see more Knox? We'll see. So, week 1 against the Jets, even though this is a solid matchup, I would rather just wait and see. Tyler Conklin is my favorite late-round tight end in fantasy football. This guy was really solid last year with Magic Mike White, with Cool Joe Flacco, and the MILF Hunter Zach Wilson. And we do know Aaron Rodgers likes throwing to the tight end, but against the Bills week 1, I feel like this is a big letdown spot for the Jumbo Jets. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description. Yesterday, we got 500 subscribers. That's crazy. But thank you guys so much for that. We recently reached 26,000 subscribers. I couldn't do any of this without you guys. I love you guys all so much. I hope you guys have a great one. Click on one of the videos on screen if you haven't seen them already. Tomorrow, we'll be back with either running back or wide receiver rankings, as well as a live stream before Thursday Night Football kickoff around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Love you guys all so much. Have a great one. As always, good boy.